I caught the first whiff of disaster the moment a calendar invite landed in my inbox with the title Corporate Alignment Initiative. In my 14 years with the firm, I had learned that corporate speak like that was usually code for someone about to turn your career upside down. The morning started peacefully enough with hot coffee and a quiet inbox, but everything shifted when Derek strolled through the double glass doors. He moved with the unearned confidence of someone who had never failed a day in his life, which made sense considering he was the founder's son, fresh out of an elite business school and ready to remake the world in his own image. His handshake was oily and slick, lacking any real warmth or substance, yet he carried himself like he owned every square foot of the building. I had spent over a decade building our compliance department from the ground up, navigating complex federal audits, regulatory shifts, and grueling contract renewals without a single negative finding on our record. While other department heads spent their budgets on fancy retreats, I stayed in the office reviewing subcontractor forms, maintaining certifications, and ensuring every single regulatory protocol was followed to the letter. So when Derek stood up in our leadership meeting with a slick presentation and announced that he was replacing our traditional compliance framework with an automated platform, I had to suppress a laugh. Then he flashed a condescending smile toward my side of the table and added that no offense was intended, but my methods were simply too traditional for where the company was headed. When the meeting ended, I walked straight into human resources and asked if my job title was officially changing, but the HR manager just fidgeted with her lanyard and claimed we were simply exploring new operational synergies. Within 48 hours, my corner office was handed over to a new hire, and I was assigned a small wooden desk right in the main lobby. Derek grinned when he passed by, claiming that reception was a strategic front-facing role where first impressions were made. Instead of arguing or making a scene, I sat down at that front desk, opened my desk drawer, and printed a fresh copy of my original employment contract, completely unbothered by the sudden move. When you spend years working in corporate oversight, you learn that being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can possibly have. I watched the daily chaos unfold from behind the lobby desk like a quiet observer, watching interns sprint back and forth while Derek paraded through the hallway explaining government contracting to people who had worked here longer than he had. He quickly brought in a friend from his networking circle to head the legal department, a guy who went by Brody and wrote legal memos that looked like high school essay drafts. Meanwhile, I quietly kept track of our official federal filings, knowing full well that our major government contract renewal was fast approaching and that the government auditors did not care about flashy corporate speeches. The crucial detail that everyone seemed to overlook was my certified procurement credential, which was the foundational requirement for our entire federal contracting status. My assistant, Chloe, was supposed to handle the renewal paperwork, but in the middle of all the restructuring, she completely forgot about it. When the automated renewal reminder hit my inbox warning that my credential would expire in 30 days, I looked across the lobby at Derek proudly showing off his new digital workflow charts to the executive team. For the first time in my 14 years with the company, I closed the reminder email without clicking the link, letting the timer tick down in complete silence. A few days later, Derek called me into a glass-walled conference room for what he called an alignment check-in, though it felt more like a poorly executed performance review. He leaned back in his chair with his fingers laced together, informing me that while I had been a legacy anchor for the company, they were streamlining roles that carried high certification requirements but low modern velocity. He explained that my shift to the front desk was permanent and that a new agile team would be handling our contract operations moving forward using advanced software tools. I kept my expression entirely neutral, looked him dead in the eye, and told him I would need the official role reassignment documented in writing. That simple request caused his confident smile to vanish for a fraction of a second, because people who rely on buzzwords always dread leaving an official paper trail. He stammered something about fluid transitions and promised that human resources would follow up with the proper documentation, but I knew no such paperwork would ever arrive. My entire career had been built on precise documentation, timestamped records, and verifiable facts, so I knew exactly how to protect myself while letting others make their own mistakes. Over the next week, my digital access to the company database began to disappear, but instead of complaining, I opened a black notebook and started documenting every single administrative shift by hand. The newly formed contract operations team was a disaster waiting to happen, made up of junior staff members who did not understand basic regulatory definitions or binding agreement clauses. From my seat in the lobby, I watched them scramble past my desk every morning, clutching compliance manuals upside down and asking each other basic questions about federal standards. They assumed I had been completely removed from the company systems, but government databases do not update simply because a company changes its internal seating chart. My login credentials for the official audit portal remained completely active because my name was still recorded as the primary officer of record on our primary government contract. On a quiet Thursday morning, I logged into the portal and pulled up our master file, confirming that my professional credential was set to expire in less than 3 weeks. A specific clause in our government agreement stated that the contractor must maintain a fully certified primary officer at all times, or the entire contract would face immediate suspension upon review. I held my mouse over the renewal button for a long moment, knowing a single click would fix the issue and keep Derek's operation running smoothly. Instead, I closed the browser tab, rested my hands on the desk, and watched the rest of the office run around in a frenzy over meaningless daily tasks. Derek spent the following week preparing for the upcoming federal review as if he were preparing a pitch for investors, ordering expensive customized binders and printing out colorful presentation slides. He held daily team huddles where he forced the staff to repeat slogans about being audit-ready, completely oblivious to the fact that real audits are decided by legal facts rather than enthusiasm. Meanwhile, I kept my handwritten log updated, noting every missed deadline, every improper file transfer, and every instance where the new team bypassed standard operating procedures. The clock kept ticking down, and with every passing day, the entire operation drifted closer to an inevitable collapse. By the second week, the office was filled with outside consultants wearing tailored suits, using complex corporate jargon to mask the fact that none of them understood our regulatory framework. They spent hours turning complex compliance data into simple pie charts, presenting them to the executive team as major breakthroughs while the actual contract files remained a complete mess. Interns rushed through the lobby asking where historical records were kept, completely unaware that the documents they were looking for had been misplaced during the move. I offered polite smiles and handed out visitor badges, keeping my observations strictly confined to the pages of my private notebook. Then, a direct message appeared in my professional inbox from a senior regulatory official I had known for nearly a decade, asking if I would be representing the firm at the upcoming renewal hearing. Reading his message felt like watching the final piece of a complex puzzle fall directly into place, because he was not reaching out to be friendly, he was verifying official records. I looked across the room at Derek high-fiving one of his consultants over a fresh set of laminated graphics, then turned back to my screen and typed a brief response confirming I would be present. I closed the app, took a slow sip of my coffee, and let the rest of the management team continue rehearsing their polished speeches. Derek had assumed that moving my desk to the lobby meant I was completely erased from the company's operational history, but legacy systems are deep and difficult to erase. Because he lacked basic operational experience, he failed to realize that official government correspondence was still routed directly to my professional email address. Sitting at the reception desk, I received every single notification, audit update, and contract inquiry, watching a complete disaster unfold in real time while those in charge remained blissfully ignorant. The new team was drowning in tasks they did not understand, desperately trying to manipulate existing templates without knowing what any of the terms actually meant. Late one afternoon, Mason, the junior analyst Derek had put in charge of the compliance migration, rushed up to my desk with sweat on his forehead and a thick folder in his hands. He stood there trembling, hesitating before asking if I knew what a specific certified authority clause meant, explaining that legal told him everything was fine but the procurement office was demanding a certified signature. I simply raised an eyebrow, gave him a faint smile, and remained completely silent until the awkwardness forced him to turn around and walk away. I did not need to give him an answer, because the contract rules were crystal clear, and no amount of corporate confidence could alter the written law. Later that evening, long after the rest of the staff had cleared out, the phone on my desk began to ring with the founder's direct line flashing on the display. When I answered, his voice sounded tired and filled with hesitation as he asked whether I was still managing the primary federal contract renewal for the upcoming audit. I looked out at the empty lobby, took a steady breath, and quietly informed him that while my name was still attached to the official file, his son had permanently reassigned me to reception weeks ago. The line went completely silent for several seconds as the reality of the situation finally set in, leaving him stammering for words before he hung up the phone without another word.